What is up, everybody? It's Ed Gow Jr. here from Dad Central, and we have another incredible episode coming up of the Dad Central Show. My co-host and co-producer, Drew Solon. What's going on?
Not much, Ed. Really, as you know, always looking forward to these conversations. I think as we were talking with our guest before we started, we're just going to talk fatherhood. And I don't know that there's much better than that. So being able to just talk fatherhood and see what comes up is, I think, the real value of the Dad Central Show. And I'm really excited to do it again.
Excellent. And before we do anything else, let's just say the Dad Central Show is sponsored by Dove Men Plus Care. Dove Men Plus Care, who believes care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there is a positive impact. So as always, we'd like to thank Dove Men Plus Care for believing in not only us, but more importantly, believing in fathers and families. So really appreciate that. We have another new friend on our platform today. And this is a gentleman I've been following a little bit online for a while. He's a funny guy, but more importantly, he's a great father, and he really believes in father and family. So let's just read about him before we bring him to the stage. Our friend today is Shannon Carpenter. He is the author of The Ultimate Stay-at-Home Dad. Maybe we need to ask him, he's the ultimate stay-at-home dad, as well as co-host of the Dad House Pod. He is a nationally known contributor, nationally known in the United States, on fatherhood, parenting, at home parenting, and has appeared on programs including Good Morning America and the What Fresh Hell podcast. That's an interesting title. And has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and Forbes, as well as authoring several columns on CNN on topics such as the importance of paternity leave. He is a popular weekly columnist for the Good Men Project, so am I, and a premier contributor to many parenting organizations such as the City Dads Group. As a writer who connects with his readers through humor and authenticity, Shannon keeps his wit sharp, and he does keep his wit sharp. Listen on all our conversations beforehand, and you're going to get some today by being a regular contributor to a widely respected humor magazine such as Weekly Humorist and Slackjaw. He is a graduate of the famed Second City with a focus on satirical writing. So let's bring up for the first time, but hopefully not the last time, Mr. Shannon Carpenter. What's going on?
I like when you guys read my bio. That's awesome. I sound great. I don't feel that way. Like, who the hell's that guy?
That's why we got those today? Bios. Remind yourself how good you actually are. You need that.
I didn't write that. My wife wrote that. I was like, well, tell them what you do. I was like, I write and do dad stuff. She goes, Shannon. I was like, you write it, then I'll just edit it. So that's what happened.
Nice. Well, you got a great copywriter there then.
Yeah,
I do.
Absolutely. Well, we want to thank you for taking the time to share with us today, and I'm looking for a great conversation with you. We've had some time to chat before we recorded this, and we're excited to have you.
I'm excited to be here. I'm like super pumped to be here. So I'm wearing my special shirt and my vest because I'm an at-home dad. No, seriously, I never get to dress up, like, ever, right? Like, I'm covered in vomit and snot stains all the time. And I was like, no, for this, I'm dressing up. Don't worry. I'm still wearing cargo pants and flip-flops. I just got the nice vest and dress shirt on because I wanted to feel pretty today. That's a true story.
Nice. Oh, gosh. Absolutely. Well, that's the beauty of the virtual platform. You can look good up top and be relaxed on the bottom. It's good.
That's right. It's Kentucky waterfall down there, man. It's just happening there. This was not intentional, but I use my Dove Men Care hair shampoo and soaps today. I love them. I use them all the time. So that's what I get ready. So shout out to Dove Men Care.
Plug.
When I want to smell good, that's what I use.
I do. I want to feel manly and yet presentable.
Drew, great. Let's get into questions, or this is going to go into another direction. I don't know where it's going to end up.
I'm going to pitch Dove Men Care for a job.
Having fun. Well, I mean, Shannon, we obviously heard your bio. We got a little bit of the background and the things that you've been able to contribute to this topic of fatherhood, which is obviously why we're here. But we always love to get a little bit of a inside peek in terms of how you got to where you are. And so we would like to ask this question a little bit. Like, tell us where it all started for Shannon, a little bit of your background growing up, the things that kind of stood out to you, even if you want to touch on like what it was like, with your relationship with your dad, anything like that would be great. Just give us a little bit of insight.
So I'm going to give you guys some what I call Arkansas stories. So we're going to get into Hickville here. I know, right? So I grew up, my memories, I grew up with my dad and, both parents, but in southern Arkansas, which is way down south in the States here. And my dad was building our house like from scratch. He was a carpenter, which is weird because my last name is Carpenter and he really was a carpenter. I know. So, that's for me, that's where I got that bond with my dad because, we would work with him, stacking bricks and carrying lumber and things that weren't very fun at the time. Now that I go back and think about it, but it's where those moments, that you truly kind of bond together with your dad. We have a lot of tough talks there. It's where I got my sex talk, the famous sex talk you get. I got mine while cleaning chickens. It's the most redneck thing I've ever said in my life, but it's true. We were cleaning chickens and my dad had the sex talk with me. And I was like, this is weird. But
you remember it now.
I was like, well, can't stop. I don't know what to do. But so from there, eventually we moved to a bigger city in Texas, Dallas Fort Worth area. And one of the reasons was because my dad had MS. He got MS, multiple sclerosis. So he started losing the ability to walk and things like that. And I became his hands. That's truly what happened. I became his hands. I did the things that he couldn't do. He would supervise me, house repairs and yard stuff because he couldn't do it anymore. And I had a really, really good relationship with him. It's not, for me, my dad is the example of what I always wanted to be. And I think that's a lot true for all of us. He was very quiet, but he was never hesitant to tell me he loved me or that he was proud of me. Like he made it a point to do it. And as his body deteriorated, I never saw him get down on himself. It was, I don't think I have that in me. The guy was just whoosh, right? And so that's the relationship with my dad. And as time went on, I went to college and met my wife and started having kids. No one was a bigger supporter of me being an at-home dad than my own father. He worked most of my life after the carpenter thing. He was an accountant. I know, right? How do you get from A to B? But he did. Really smart guy, good with his hands. But he always told me, when I told him I want to be a stay-at-home dad, he's like, you should. You'll never regret it. And he knew that because we spent so much time together in Arkansas together, doing those physical things and doing those things together. And the way that kind of the at-home dad thing worked, and this is a true story, I've told this before, is I had my first daughter at 15 months and she just changed everything. Like in a way I was not expecting. You think and then you don't know, and you just don't know until you know. And so about 15 months in, my wife was pregnant with our second. We're about to have our second. And I realized this is not what I wanted. I was working a nice government job. I had stability. I had a good paycheck. I had benefits. I had a career track. All those kinds of things, but I didn't have my daughter and I didn't have my kids and I didn't like the way we were doing it. It felt like we were in a rut. So I went to my wife right before we were having our second. I said, I think one of us needs to stay home. And so we were talking about it and I joked that it should be me. And then as soon as I said it, I realized it wasn't a joke. It absolutely should be me because I wanted to do it. I wanted to be there. And financially, it made more sense. Her career track in advertising is higher than a government worker. So all those three things together, that's why I made the decision I did. And that was 14 years ago. And I haven't regretted it since. It's been the best experience of my life by far. And I think my dad would be proud of me. He passed away, but he'd be proud. Yeah.
Well, first of all, condolences on the loss of your father, but
it was years ago.
Yeah, even though it still happened. So I like to honor that.
Thank you.
It's the way I am. Let me ask, the relationship you had with your father growing up, did you realize, you realize how special it is now, but do you realize how special it was then?
No, I didn't, because sometimes you fight with your dad, right? And this is a true story. This is a story my own kids love, right? So my dad and I were actually really close, and, we didn't have to talk a lot, and he wasn't a very big talker, but he was always there, always there. However, as calm as that man ever was, there was a couple times I actually made him mad. And I told my daughter this, and she loves it, is one time I made him so mad that he stood up from his wheelchair. Right. And my daughter was like, what? I was like, yeah, apparently the cure for MS is to piss them off so bad they stand up. And I remember laughing at the time. And that diffused the situation because it was about a girl or me not doing what I was supposed to do. But I was a 16-year-old cocky kid, way cocky, ex-football player kind of thing. Just like, rah, rah. And the dude stood up and I was like, uh-oh. I was like, he's going to put me in my place. Wow. And I was like, man, he's only like 5'7" too. He's not very tall, but he looks just huge. But wow. I didn't know that those moments were going to be special until I started thinking about them years in adulthood with my own kids. And I started telling those stories to my own kids and to other people. And I have 1,000 of these stories of growing up in Arkansas. My brother and I built a boxing ring in Arkansas, which was nothing but a plank of boards for my brother to beat the crap out of me, but just legally, right? Like he had an excuse, like, no, it's a boxing ring. And those are great stories to tell, but you don't know that when you're living them. You're just living it for the moment. And that is my key. Live for that moment and be present when you're there, especially with your kids. And hopefully that's what I learned from my dad and from my family. And hi, Blake. That's my brother.
Okay.
Nice.
Well, just carrying on to that, what has your relationship with your dad taught you about your fatherhood journey?
You know, the thing with my dad is the dude was just calm, like all the time, like nothing could rattle him. And even as an adult, I don't know exactly how he did it. He's a Vietnam War vet. He saw combat. He lost his best friend there. I'm sure the MS was not the worst that had happened to him or he would seen, right? He had malaria. And I think his perspective on that is what I try to take, that if you have your family and you have your people, you're going to be okay. And my mom told me years later that when I was growing up and when I was going to college, is that my dad was afraid he was going to pass away before I could take care of myself. And it was a big reason that he pushed me as hard as I did, that he wanted me to be self-sufficient when he couldn't be there to teach the lessons. So he taught all the lessons early. And so I respect that now as an adult more than I did as a kid, as a 16-year-old kid that made a disabled man stand up, right? Now I'm like, oh, you smart bastard. It's like, now I get it. And to take that calmness and direction, that's what I strive for. I don't always hit it. Lord knows I don't, especially with teenagers, but I try. That's the lesson I try to take.
Yeah, one of the things that I heard as you told that is your dad's desire for you to be, self-sufficient or successful. And one of the things that we talk about on this show is our sort of our tagline is it's tools to raise confident, successful kids. And so, I mean, can you talk a little bit about what you think? How did your dad go about doing that for you beyond just pushing you? Maybe what you're doing now as you think about that for your kids and helping them be successful.
So with my dad, and something that I try now, is he really truly believed that everything would work out, like nothing's impossible. And it wasn't just talk with him, like he believed it. And I guess a guy that came from rice paddies and war, that was a good reason to believe it. I think that is a lesson and something that teaches me to do that same with my kids. That if you just show up, that's so much part of it. It's 90% of showing up. It really is. And then showing them examples when that actually works. And to kind of give you an example of that, I was taking the kids out one day and they were 9, 10, 11 years old. And I had all their friends with me. It was like 6 kids total. And we were doing the rooftop of City Hall, where there's a great view of Kansas City. And I made a joke. I said, yeah, we should go see the mayor. And one of my daughter's friends like, oh, okay, we'll go see the mayor. So I did. I was like, show up. And I knocked on the door and they answered, and Sly James was amazing. But again, those types of experiences is what I've tried to teach my kid, that if you show up and try, you're going to get the no's. You're going to get rejected. It's going to happen, but you're going to win a lot too. Show up. That's 90% of your battle right there. The rest of it can work out.
Yeah, I really love that, especially the it's going to work out. You find a way, or you take a risk, right? You took that risk. Well, let's go see the mayor. What happens? They say no, but what I love about that is you're modeling it out for them. You're not just talking to them about it.
Yes,
you're actually doing it with them.
Yeah, and for me, as someone who writes about fatherhood a lot and teaches about it, there's two things. You said modeling. That's a big thing to me. It's one thing to have people read my words, but it's another thing for kids to see those actions. And I try to back it up. And again, I fail, but when I hit good. And the other one is what I have termed micro exposures, teaching these big complex topics a bit and a tiny bit at a time, from relationships and interpersonal relationships to money management, to de-escalation, to anger management. You take these topics and you show them piece by piece by piece, a little at a time. Because, a 12-year-old is not going to listen to you. A 3-year-old is not going to listen to you for an hour. I'm not going to listen to you for an hour. And I love to listen to people. So yeah, that's my general approach to my parenting style, is to take these topics and break them down so they're relatable and no longer in like 10 minutes. And then we get to the next part.
Yeah, that's great. I really like that.
Good stuff.
Can you take us back to, after you made the decision to stay at home, what was that process like to actually become the stay-at-home dad, and how did you navigate that first little period of time? Because I can imagine that would be really challenging.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys will like this. It's a good story. I like this story. So once we decided to be a stay-at-home dad, my first day as a stay-at-home dad was January 1st, 2008. Like, I know the date, right? Because
D-Day.
Yeah, that was it, right? I had a newborn who was like 3 months old and a 15 or 19-month old. And my wife had a new job here in Kansas City, and we were still in Texas. So she moved up here by herself for a month. So my first month was by myself, right? I know, first time like ever really that kind of thing. And it went good for about 3 days. I felt confident for about 3 days. And then my daughter got sick for the first time and turned into like Linda Blair from The Exorcist. Like, it was all over, man. It was hitting me in the face. It was going to the back.
Wow.
It was bad, right? It's that moment you have to decide, what am I made of? Because it was like 2 a.m. and my baby was screaming and the dog was eating throw up off the baby and she was still going. It was just bad, right? And I couldn't even shower because they would freak out. And so that was my first month. It was like a trial by fire. And I was like, I'm not going to make it. But then you say that, and then you have no choice. I mean, what am I going to do, right? She's far away. I've quit my job to do this. Let's do it. So we moved up here, and then I started getting more control. Now, that first year was really, really hard because there's no one, especially at this time, there was no support like y'all's show, right? Like Dad Central. It just didn't occur. Every article that was written was not written for dads and parenting. It was full of platitudes like take one for the team and win it for the Gipper. And I'm like, look, I know who the Gipper actually is. And that didn't make sense even then, right? Like, I know his history, So I was like, this is terrible. So there was no advice. And so we had to figure it out on our own. And I decided that I could do anything. And that word anything is what matters in that sentence. Because when you really think about it, it's huge. It's endless, right? Which also means it has no borders, which can be terrifying. But it also means freedom. It means I don't have to raise my kids the way that people tell me to do. I don't have to go and craft things out of paper cups, which I hate doing, right? I don't have to sit around sing-alongs if I don't like doing that. I can make them what I want them to do and do what I want to do with them. So that changed everything for us. So instead of doing some of the crafty stuff, we built a trebuchet, like a fully working trebuchet. You could throw a pumpkin 50 yards, right? That's how I craft, right? We built this last couple of years ago, they built a guillotine. Now the kids built that one. I just gave them instructions, but we built it. I did build the blade. I know. But I had 16 kids doing this. And then I became part of a dad's group. And that's my linchpin there. It is a group of men who are all stay-at-home dads or fathers in general with uneven schedules. We all have them, right? And we raised our kids together. And I've been with the same guys for 14 years, 5 dads, 16 kids, and they've been my bedrock through all this. And they taught me how to do things. And then we started doing things that we wanted to do, Civil War battlefields here in the U.S. or museums that we wanted to see. I've seen the world's largest ball of twine. That's a real thing. It's in Cawker City, Kansas, and I've seen it. And once I realized that I didn't have to do the things that I thought society wanted me to do and just do it the way I wanted to do, changed everything completely. And I haven't looked back.
Shannon, I want to stay on a minute about those early years.
Yeah.
When you and your wife made that decision for you to be the stay-home dad, did you get any pushback from anybody?
The pushback, I'm a little bit bigger guy, so I don't usually get pushback. I can tell you a couple things, like that people don't say to my face. Now, internet-wise, no, people have called me every name you could possibly think of. They think I have fallopian tubes, the whole thing. And I'm like, look, I can build you a deck and I can bake a tart. Neither one of them are gender specific. I can do them both really well, right? In the early days, though, my father and my grandfather were my examples of men that I wanted to be. They supported me 100%. However, with that said, there were times out in the world you notice things, like it's not unusual for a stay-at-home dad or dad to go to the park on a Tuesday and wonder if he's going to have to prove those kids are his because it's creepy that the dad is there. That has actually happened. And not to tell
Wow.
it's never happened to me. What happens to me usually at the park is I'm ignored or people give me space, especially when there are toddlers, right? There's no community for you. There's no conversation there. The isolation is really, really tough. Another time, right when I was beginning, my wife was talking to a lady at the grocery store who ran a mom's group apparently and saw my wife was pregnant. And she gave my wife her card and said, you should join the group and we'll have fun. And my wife said, well, my husband's going to stay home. And I kid you not, she snatched the card back. Like, I don't know why she took it back. I know, right? I was like, oh, that's kind of mean. And she just kind of said, good luck. And that was it. And I was like, oh, so it wasn't overtly negative for me, but it wasn't exactly welcoming either. And you see these things from time to time. Now, when I have my dad's group with me, it's totally different. It's like we're unicorns. You have 7 guys that are pushing strollers, right, with babies in them. We become an oddity that needs to be photographed. I've stopped and had people take pictures of us, right? It's the weirdest thing. But when you're alone, and I understand why in today's world a lot of times, but you're seen as a threat. And I wish that wasn't the way, because honestly, I'm just lonely. I just want to talk about something other than whatever cartoon, Bluey, or in my day, Dora. I can't do it anymore. So that was the pushback I got early on within those communities, but it's gotten a lot better now.
Good stuff. Drew?
Well, the challenge there, I would imagine there's sounds like there's lots of them, but the idea of isolation and loneliness and no one else really understanding kind of what you're doing, you kind of are fully alone. And so the combating that with that dad's group sounds really powerful. Can you talk a little bit more about how did you find that? So let's say, because I think there might be people listening, or a dad who's listening is like, you know what, I kind of feel the same thing. I feel isolated. I feel alone.
Yeah.
What do I do? Can you talk to us about how you found or built that community or got into that community?
Absolutely. And before we even tell you how, I'm going to tell you straight up, citydadsgroups.org. They run dads groups throughout the country in the U.S., and they even have one in Toronto. Shout out to those guys. They're great guys. Online, athomedad.org is a great online that runs several groups. And then short of that, there's often parenting groups now. You can find local community centers or churches or things of that nature. And so that's actually how you break that isolation, either internet or in person, or start your own dad's group. For me, back in the day that it just wasn't that organized. None of this existed yet. And I tried to join so many moms groups and never heard anything back. And I was just, mentally that takes a toll on you. You slide into depression and anxiety. And I certainly did. And after like 6 months, my wife told me, she's like, you need to get friends. And I'm like, I'm trying. No one will talk to me. And I'm like, do I stink? I don't know what's going on. So, one day she came home with a webpage that she'd print off, said Casey Dads on it. And so I was lucky enough to be in a town that actually had a established dads group. And they were looking for what we call Generation 2, the next group of guys to take over. And that happened to be me and the 5 dads that we eventually took over that with. It was, man, I cannot tell you how lucky I am. They're the guys that I do the Dad House podcast with, Larry, Mike, Jake, and Mick. Guys, I've been with them for 14 years. They've helped me through everything. Our latest thing is our kids driving and dating. So that's what our conversations are now. But we've done potty training together. We've done food and nutrition. We've done discipline when they're 2. We've done all those things, and I've had people to do that with. And if you're alone out there as a dad, not just a stay-at-home dad, man, I get it. I get how hard that is. Come find other dads, man. Go to this show or other shows, wherever you need to go and you feel comfortable. Get that support because they're out there, and it makes a difference in your life.
Wonderful.
One quick question. Was there ever, it sounds like your situation was almost out of necessity. You were like,
yes,
you got to do this. But there might be those that are out there like, I'm not sure, or I'm kind of afraid. Maybe they won't say they're afraid, but there's something that's holding them back. What would you say to anyone who has something that's maybe holding them back to maybe,
I'm going to give them the advice from a guy named Jake, who's in my own group. Jake is very, very introverted. He does not like crowds. Like you can tell it makes him, anxious, right? He gets jittery with it, but he always came, and he still comes, and he always went on the adventures because he says, you never know what's going to happen when you show up to those. That as difficult as it was, things got better. And he means that, right? And if Jake is coming to it, then anybody can come. And even though that's online, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to be best buddies. But remember that your friendships and your world matter just as much as your kids. And if you don't think it does, you need to pay attention more, because it absolutely does.
That's a great point.
Good stuff. We could go on forever on this subject.
I know.
Questions we could ask. But so let me ask you, and I'm sure this changes over the years. What has been your greatest challenge as a dad?
Man, I was thinking about that question today. There's so many, right? The greatest challenge of being a dad is realizing at the beginning that it's all on your shoulders, like truly, and not just halfway either, right? You're not there to help. You're not the JV parent team, man. You're the guy. You're the go-to man. You were the cavalry. And for me, it came on really early. So my daughter was not latching during breastfeeding, right? And my wife was crying, and my daughter was crying, and my wife just had gallbladder surgery, like right at birth. So she was like laid up. The house was a wreck. I was working all day, and I went down at midnight to find a bottle, and they were all dirty, right? And I was like, and everyone's crying, and I snapped a little bit, and I went outside at midnight in my little suburban neighborhood and just screamed and cussed. And then I had a pacifier with me, a passy, and I just chunked it as far as I could. And I'm pretty sure I hit a neighbor's window. So sorry about that, guys. Didn't mean to do that. But after that moment, right, of how hard it was at the beginning, this was when my daughter was first born. That's when it hit me, is no one's coming. This is me. This is my job. I'm the cavalry. I need to stop waiting for other people to tell me what to do, and instead take control and do what I know I need to do. And that was it. And I think as a father, once you make that transition, it carries on throughout their lives. Like I still use that mentality today with my own kids. My daughter, for example, they had a walkout in her school this year because of bullying and slurs and things like that. And she was not having it. And so she walked out. And so I was very proud of her determination and support of that, and that she made the decision. But then I stepped up to talk to her about what it meant and why she did it. And to be able to be a part of that moment that is going to define who she is as an adult, and not waiting for someone else to do it or just ignoring it, man, can't do that. That's what I mean by stepping up and being the parent, not the help, not the JV team, but the parent. And I use that constantly.
That is cool. How have the challenges changed in complexity over the years? Because you're such a great storyteller. I'm sure that the challenges you had even 6 months ago are different than the ones you're having now.
I know. Well, they are and they aren't, because what is a teenager but a toddler who can swear now, right? Isn't that what it really works out? That's the way it works out. But when they're younger, right? The biggest problem I had when they're younger is I didn't know how to do anything, right? Like where to go and how to do. And no articles that I read gave me that knowledge, right? There's so much more to childcare than changing a diaper, man. We all know this. It's like, where do you go? How do you find the adventures? What do I pack in my diaper bag? And that's why I wrote the book. The book that I write, yes, you're going to laugh, but it has real advice in there on how to really do stuff that you need to know. Like, if you pick out a stroller, don't let your wife do it. They're usually shorter than we are, and it's going to hurt your back. You need one with adjustable handle. I got that advice from one of the dads in the book, right? I thought that was great. So in the younger years, it was figuring out almost from scratch a lot of the things I had to do, right? Which still kind of translates to when they're older now, because we're dealing with things that I never had to deal with as a younger man, right? And they were always there, like the systemic racism and the police brutality or the climate change, but I just didn't have to deal with it as just a mediocre white guy. Let's call it for what it is, right? It wasn't in my world, but it is in my world, and it's in my children's world. And I need to discuss this with them, and I've got to figure out and learn with them as we go. And so a lot of my writing now is kind of focused on those kind of areas as well. The physical care I don't need as much, but helping my teen son deal with anger, just because teenage boys have anger, helping my teen daughter develop confidence that no one can tell her no, she can do what she wants, right? To be there for those moments. That's the new challenge. And again, I'm finding, a lot of the stuff is not written for dads. So I do. That's what I do. I'm like, no, I'm going to go talk to all these people and we're going to figure it out.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
What I love about, I mean, goes back to your earlier story about what I think you've taken from your father, even maybe from your grandfather, in terms of always believe that there's a way to find a solution,
Yeah.
essentially. And I love that because you're living that out, and now you're sort of seeing that in your children. But I'm wondering about, let's say at this stage now, some of the things that are in your children's world, some of the things that you're never had to deal with before, but you've built a solid foundation in terms of the relationship with kids. But what's the skill? What skills are you bringing to the table that are helping you build that
Yeah.
relationship and navigate these uncertainties that or newness that your kids are facing?
So I know it's a complex question, but it's actually a simple answer. And I didn't realize how much I wasn't doing it till I did it. But listening, it is a unique skill on its own. And hear me out, because I actually write about this. Dr. Linda Nelson is a researcher at Wake Forest University, and she writes about communication with fathers and daughters. And she has a book out. I highly recommend it for this. But the ability to listen without interruption and without trying to fix it is essential, because what you want to do is not give them the answer. You want to lead them to the answer, or have that critical thinking skills. And that's really hard to do for us dads, man, because I'm not built to sit back and wait. That is not I built a guillotine, guys. I mean, we don't wait for things to happen. We go make them, right?
Yeah.
So I have to check myself, like physically check myself, that when my daughter has an argument with her brother or an argument with a friend, that I don't try to fix it, or a boyfriend or girlfriend, or whatever situation may be in for these people. I have to listen to her, because what they really need is they need someone to hear what they're saying and take it seriously. And I think as a society, that is the part that we've failed. Now in the US, we have a gun problem. Let's call it what it is, right? We have mass shootings in schools, and the response of some have been to terrorize those kids who survived it, right? This is a big deal with me. I've had those school emails where someone brought a gun to school. It's a thing here. So I need to listen to my kids and listen to those kids that this happened to. Don't brush them off. Don't say whatever. Say, I don't know. Listen to them and let's find a solution. And that's an extreme example, but you do this on everything. Sometimes my daughter just needs to be pissed off. And my job is not to tell her how not to be pissed off, but to share that anger with her. And that's what I try to do. And speaking of, my daughter's coming home right now. You're going to hear.
That's good.
Hey, baby, say hi. Oh, she got like deer in headlight looks. I'm doing an interview. I'm doing an interview with the Dad Central Show. Here's my daughter. Here she is.
Hey, how you doing?
You guys want it authentic? This is it.
That's right. This real. Absolutely. Well, that's great.
I have a question that's come out from our great conversation here.
Yeah.
How has being a father helped your resiliency?
Oh, that's a good one. I never got asked that one before. I would say a great deal, because you don't have the option. At least I don't have the option to quit, right? Like, you have a choice to make. Either you're going to be a good father or a bad father, right? And how you define that is so many things, right? My definition comes from, you have to show up. That's where it starts. Everything else will work out. You have to show up. And so the resiliency is, I just don't have the option not to be there, because I won't let myself to do that, which makes everything else manageable. Even those really bad things and really bad days that happen, because they do happen, and you come upon those answers or those questions that you don't have answers to, that you don't know what to do, that you are lost like a babe in the woods, but at least you're there. That's my comeback for that. It's like, we may have failed, but I'm laying on the ground with you with a bloody nose. So there you go.
It's interesting. Your daughter in the background did a thumbs up. Said, yes, I know. I saw that.
She's going to give me crap later. She's going to make fun of me later for an answer I give. How much you want that?
Well, it's good. One of the things that we haven't touched on, but I think in your stories, you've shared a little bit about it, is the importance of the partnership with your partner. And so can you talk a little bit about that and how that feeds into either your growth and your ability to show up as a dad, but also how you support each other?
So for any marriage, and giving marriage advice, I don't like doing it, because every marriage is so different, right? Like, everyone's battles are so different. Everyone's demons are so different. For my wife and I, the way it's worked out is we were together for a very long time before we had kids. I've been with my wife for 27 years. So I was with her for about 11 years before we had kids. So we established everything based on love and friendship between us, right? Now, when I became a stay-at-home dad, that was still there, but we had to change how we interacted with each other, right? And we learned from that after some very rocky kind of moments in those first early years about expectations. And I think any couple, that's where you really have to start. And you don't beat around the bush. You say it plainly. Because my wife, she learned that I'm not a mind reader, right? And I learned that I can't expect her to know what makes me happy. Like she may want me to do something and it just doesn't work. So we're very, very blunt with what we need and what we want from each other. I take my happiness as a personal thing, that it's my job to make me happy and to go find those things to do that. Now, as a stay-at-home dad, our expectations were different on some levels because our levels of clean look different. What she considered clean, I didn't. I was like, that's deep cleaning. That's not the way I do things. And there were things like that. And then it came down to what eventually it transpired to for me is we wrote a job description for me. Like I honestly do that. I have a job description like anybody else, right? I treat being a father like being a dad. So I have a list of things that I'm responsible for and things that I'm not, right? Like I legit won't clean windows. I do every once in a while, but I'm like, I'm not doing that. I don't know why I threw that in there, but it was a negotiating tactic. So I took it, and I don't hang up my wife's
easy wins when you can get one.
You do, right? And I don't hang up my wife's work shirts because those you need a degree from Harvard to get them on the hanger right. So I won't do it. I've not done them in 14 years. I'm like, you do that. And she understands that my job first and foremost is to raise the kids. Everything is secondary, including housework and things like that. Now the house is usually clean and dinners are cooked, but I think those things helped us, but it's just a really good way of saying open communication and to be blunt. And that comes back to money matters as well, right? What are your goals? What are you spending? What do you want to do? And getting on the same page and hearing each person out. Because early on, the funny thing was in the first year of me being a stay-at-home dad is we sat down and I felt like I was doing all the work. And I found out in that conversation that my wife felt the exact same way, that she was doing all the work. I was like, whoa, no. You can't, that's mine. I use that already. Can't use that, right? But understanding and having empathy for each other in that relationship, no matter what situation you're in, what kind of partner you have, that is important, having that empathy. And now we're lucky in this role with our traditional roles reversed, we have natural empathy for what the other's going through. And that's made it a great deal.
Okay. Good
Yeah,
stuff.
I think that's so powerful. Sorry, Ed.
No, it's okay. No, if you want to add on to that, I have something I want to have Shannon share. But I want Shannon to talk about fatherhood and strength of character.
Okay. Oof. It's one of those things that I'm always trying to reach because I don't know. Everyone has that vision of who they are in their head, right? And he's unattainable. That's the way it is for me. There's the guy that I want to be and the guy that I really am. And even some of my writing, it goes by my wife. And she says, well, you wrote this to sound like the way you wanted it to be, but that's not the way it was. I was like, damn it, she's right. So that means embracing my failures, which I've done pretty religiously over the last 14, 15 years, because I think those failures are just opportunities to learn. I know it sounds like a Disney movie quote, and it probably is. I might have ripped that off. Sorry, Disney. But, it is a chance to learn. I let my kids see me fail, and that's been how I learned everything. I learned that I needed to carry duct tape in my diaper bag because I was on my last diaper and the tab broke. Right. And that's no good. That's a lot of pee in the car that I have to clean up. Right. And there's things like that, but you take those failures and you learn. And I think that's where your character grows. You're not perfect. You don't have to be, but learn. You got to learn. If you're not learning, then it's pointless.
Mm-hmm. Building off of that, did you ever find yourself beating yourself up? Because I think there are maybe a lot of dads who beat themselves up like, man, I can't believe I made this mistake. Why am I doing this again? So how do you work through that? Or what would you say to a dad if they came, man, I keep messing up. I don't know what to do.
So, again, we've all been there and I've been there. Hell, I'm still there. I still beat myself up for my failures now, or things that I think I should do better. Because again, that guy in my head is never going to match the guy that I really am. I find solace in my community and my other dads. That's true. I talk to them openly about it. And once I know that people have screwed up as bad as I have, then it makes me feel just as good. So, and I got to get an example for something like that. So I write now that my kids are in school, and that's a new thing for me. I mean, I've always written, but I write professionally now. So I'm still a stay-at-home dad, but whether it's school, I crack the jokes, I write the articles, I write the books. And I noticed that I was having a hard time juggling between those three, kids, wife, and work. It is really, really hard. And I'm a stay-at-home dad saying it's really, really hard, right? And you can't do it all. And so what I ended up doing is I went to a therapist for this because it was just not matching in my head. And I was, like you said, I was beating the crap out of myself that I couldn't be perfect to everybody all the time. And what he told me really kind of hit home is like, when you're doing something, put your hat on. When you're with your kids, your dad hat is on. You're not work Shannon anymore. And when you're at work, straight dad hat or straight work hat. And when you're with wife, that's the hat you put on. And so I have to make a physical thought in my head, say, okay, I'm going to intentionally forget about this. Otherwise, I couldn't make it, because otherwise I do beat myself up too much. And I've done things like I forgot to sign my daughter up for volleyball one year, and she was really into it. And I forgot. It just totally slipped my mind. And it was all on me, but I had a deadline and something else. And so now I organize my own head. I don't organize just my life. I organize my head. And that's important. That got me out of seasonal depression stuff. That gets me out of anxiety when my head is organized and going where I want it to be. Dad's a guilt thing, not as big as mom guilt. Mom guilt's a bigger thing, but we got it too.
I want to ask you too, we're just having a great conversation here.
Yeah.
Your thoughts from your lens, the impact of the pandemic on fatherhood.
Oof. Those poor guys. My heart goes out to every parent. So if I'm a stay-at-home dad, right, and I've been doing this for 14 years, if I had a hard time during the pandemic, people who worked and had kids got destroyed. I saw it in our Zoom classes. Like my 3 kids did a year of homeschooling, basically, virtual schooling with a school, but I was basically the teacher, right? And one day, and this is a true story, I was teaching Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven to my daughter, right, as a freshman. My son, I was going over linear algebra with him for my middle schooler. And for my youngest, I had to make stupid cardboard flip-flops. All in the space of 2 hours, right? Like all these things. And I am dying. I am so pissed off and so tired, and my mind is bouncing so much. And I had a really, really hard time with all that. And I think working dads and other dads, they got put in an unfamiliar position. A lot of them that haven't been doing a lot of the child care or the primary caregiver or working from home and multitasking like that. And I think they struggled, and I think my book came out at just the right time to say, okay, it's cool, guys, do these things, especially if you have toddlers. It's going to help you. It's going to help you figure these things out, because there's a bunch of us that have been through something like this, when we're there all the time. It's going to help. And I think with dads that went through that and through the pandemic like that, I think they need help. And I think the moms do too, because I was sitting in some classes with my kid, my youngest one, and the teacher said, well, go get your mom or dad. And the kid said, I can't. My mom's sleeping. She has to work at night. And man, my heart just broke. I almost went and got that kid. I was like, I'll teach him. Wow. I don't care. But I think, it kind of made it was really hard for dads, if I think I know what I'm doing, I broke. I can't even imagine, man.
Can you talk a little bit about the importance of actually asking for help? Because I think that's what I've heard as a regular theme is, going out and getting, you said we need help, but so many people resist it. Can you talk about the importance of actually asking for help?
Sure. Because it's hard. Men don't do it. We don't like doing it, and even in my own dad's group, we make fun of each other for doing it. Now we've done this stuff, but sometimes we just show up because the guy won't ask for help. We're like, screw off, we're going to help you anyway. Right. We do that because we won't ask for it, because it makes, and I talked a big time talk with my daughter and some professionals about this on an article I wrote, but it makes us feel vulnerable. And as men, we're constantly driven to compete. We're constantly driven to be the tough one. And we're scared of what happens when we're vulnerable. And that's a big problem. That's a big deal. There is an agency out there in the U.S. called Movember, or there are everywhere, Movember, that advocates men's health. And I was able to talk to their people out there one day. And they said the biggest thing we can do as men to help with this kind of stuff is to have intentional conversations, and not surface level conversations, but have those conversations where they are at. at the bar, at the game, and don't say how you doing, say how you really doing, and then sit there and listen. Now, how does that get you to ask for help? I don't know. If for you to ask for help, you got to have a moment of self-awareness that it doesn't mean you're weak. And that's hard. And that goes back to mental health too. And my book, chapter 4, is about mental health. And it's the hardest chapter I've ever written because I had to strip away all the jokes, all the swear words and everything else, and just tell it like it is. And that's a really hard thing for me to do, to put that out and be so naked in the world like that. I hope it helps though. So that's my biggest advice: is have real conversations. Know that everyone needs help. If I'm the ultimate stay-at-home dad, and I ask for help all the goddamn time. So there you go.
Well, one of the things I say, Shannon, to fathers and to men is even strong men and dads struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you one little example. I heard Ronnie Lott. I don't know if you guys know who he is. He was a 1980s San Francisco toughest dude, lost a finger in a football game kind of thing. And he gave a speech about how much being a father meant to him and all this kind of stuff we're talking about. Like, if that dude is opening up, Ronnie Lott, I can be just fine. Like, he's missing like part of his pinky because he got it caught in a football helmet. Wow. So yeah, that's the examples that I take. And then again, my father was the toughest man I ever knew. Really, really was. And I ended up being his helper for years, and I think that's a great example.
Well, I think that, the other thing to add to this is it's a sign of strength.
Yes.
To be willing to be courageous enough to say, I actually don't know that I've got this. I could really use someone to come alongside me. And so, that to me, it takes courage, right? It takes that vulnerability, the courage you had to write that, that chapter in your book. You just said, I'm naked out in the world. Well, that takes some courage to put yourself out there. And so I want to remind people that it's actually a sign of strength when you're able to put yourself into that point. And maybe I'll ask this: what's the feedback? What have people been sharing? Have you heard people say, you know what, thanks for this chapter, it really helped me. It helped me realize maybe there's some things that I could probably do differently because you were willing to talk about it.
Yeah, I actually have. It's been heartening in a very, very good way. I've had people email me fan mail, which is really cool. So if you guys read my book, send me fan mail. That makes me feel way better as a writer. But I've had guys reach out to me a lot, and tell me about that chapter and how that made a difference. And I've been a part of some conferences where I've spoken on some things, and guys have come up to me. And to know that I've helped by putting it out there with myself, man, that's the best feeling. That's better than getting the book published. Like, this is the good part. Like, seriously, So yeah.
Nice. Drew?
Well, I mean, normally we like to talk about resources, but you're the one who basically has built the resources. So, and you've shared a bunch of resources already. So that's what I would normally ask is, okay, so like, what's the resource? But why don't we do this? What's your one piece of advice that if somebody's listening to this story that you want them to take away to help them be a better dad, or to be a dad that helps raise confident, successful kids? What would you tell them to go and do?
I would tell them that you're better than you think you are. That's it. Nice. I know it sounds like such a cliche, but we are harder on ourselves than anybody else. I'm harder on myself than anyone else is. And I think to myself, I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't be a dad. I can't be the dad I want. It's not true. I've seen it time and time again. And the resources I've mentioned throughout this conversation are the places that have gotten me there. There's plenty of books. If you got a brand new baby and you want to know the baby owner's manual, that's a great one. It reads like stereo instructions, but it tells you how to do everything. There's resources like that, but when it comes down to it, you are better than you think you are. You just have to see it.
It's great.
Yeah, it's really good. Don't think what I can't, think what if you do it.
That's right. And if you mess it up, that doesn't mean you mess up. It means you just did it a new way.
Hey, you're just experimenting. You're not failing.
I know.
Right?
We actually built a chariot with my kids. If that happens, you can do anything else.
You got to send us some of these pictures.
I'll send you some.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Drew, anything else before we let? I don't know what he's going to build next with his daughter or his kids. Anything else you want to add on?
All I want to say is
Iron Maiden.
You're going to build Iron Maiden.
Yeah, this summer we're building Iron Maiden. We're going to figure out how to do that. I don't know how yet, but we'll figure it out. See, there you go. Maybe I'm just cocky. Maybe that's my problem. I'm just overly cocky.
Well, what we'll do is we'll ask your kids next time. So, how was building the Iron Man? Then we'll get the real inside information.
I'll bring you. There's 16 of them in our dad's group. I'll bring them on. They'll love to talk to you.
Oh, nice. That's great. No, for me, Shannon, I've really loved this conversation. When we first talked, just the connecting with other dads, hearing their stories, hearing what they're doing. There's always something that I take from every single conversation. And really what I really resonated with what you shared today is this idea of just showing up. Yeah. And then that last message of you're better than you think. So just show up, and guess what? You might surprise yourself. Show up. Yep. And you might have that impact. Show up and your kids will appreciate it. Show up and just see what might happen. And so I think that's a fantastic take-home message that I really I'm going to think on a lot and just keep trying to show up in my life as a dad.
Just remember, you are the attraction more than anything else. Nice. More than Disney World. You are the thing.
Yeah. And I just love that message. And I love the ground you've broken in terms of this stay-at-home dad and being a leader in this and then bringing it to people and helping them do this better. So I just want to say thank you so much for this conversation and for being part of the show and just sharing your wisdom, insight, and your stories, which I loved.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, I kudos to what Drew said. For those people who want to pick up the book, that's what it looks like. And all his contact information is right there.
Yep.
So if you want to pick up that book, go on any of those platforms. You'll be able to pick it up. And also the Dad House Pod, which is hilarious.
Thank you.
Let me tell you. So
we have fun.
Just think about it. This, Shannon, times 4. So just think about it that way.
Well, next episode, we're actually going to try to figure out the best quality chicken nugget. That's going to be a thing.
Oh my!
We're going to do some scientific testing. We're going to do that. We don't know it yet, but we're going to do that.
We'll do the taste testing.
Yeah, it's going to be blind taste testing. I got a whole thing planned.
Well, Shannon, awesome. I want to say, just compliment what Drew has already said. I'd like to thank everything you have done, are doing, and will be doing to help fathers and their families around the world. You always have a home here. If there's anything we can do to help you and your pursuit to great fatherhood and great families, we're here to help and serve you. I want to say thank you for taking the time to share with us today.
Glad to be here. I love talking dad stuff all day, man.
I couldn't figure that out.
Yeah, I just do it.
All right.
My daughter's probably giving me a dirty look. I'm just like, shut up, Dad. I'm like, okay.
Thanks again. We'll chat soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Sean. Well. Have a good afternoon.
Well, Drew, another epic conversation, man.
There's so much value in just coming together for these conversations from my perspective. I don't want to, speak for everyone, but hopefully, there's something that everyone can take and say, I can actually do this now. I can, learn from the story that I've heard, or I can, have a different perspective based on what I heard, or I can actually practically do this. I'm going to go build an Iron Maiden with my kids, next week. This is what we're doing. And so that's what I think is, for me, the really valuable about hearing from different dads, different perspectives, different people to help fathers show up and be great for their kids and their families. So really love this opportunity.
Yeah, I just put it short and simply, every dad's story has value.
Yep.
Everyone. That's why we're doing it, to help fathers and their families and just showing and showcasing the value of fatherhood. Mm-hmm. So I think that I'll just put it short and sweet. So people want to find out more about the podcast or the show. I like to say show, not the show. You can check it out here, replays. Great resources available for dads and those who love them. dadcentral.ca. Also, if you want to get in contact directly, give us a shout via email. If you have guest suggestions, or you have something good, or have something not good to say about the conversation to add value, we're wanting to hear from it. And finally, as always, want to say thank you to Doveman Plus Care. Get it right? For the sponsorship. Doveman Plus Care believes in care is the best of a man, because when men care for themselves and others, there is positive impact. We want to say thank you for taking time out of your positive, productive schedule for watching this. Follow us on all our social media platforms. Thanks very much, and looking forward to the next conversation. Take care, everybody. Be well.